Om Shanti. Welcome to this session of Interview with the Raj Yogi, where we get to take one aspect, one topic of spiritual study and go deeply into it through conversation. And the theme tonight is pure awareness. But as always, we'll start with a reflection. As I sit here with even just a little effort, I can observe the thoughts in my mind, the flow of traffic inside, as if I have this inner mouth, this constant chatter. And very often, when I'm grasping to understand something, I'll try to articulate it through words. If I'm explaining to another person words through the physical mouth, and if trying to articulate to myself words in the mind or written words on paper. But there's a much deeper way of measuring what I understand than coming into outer or inner words. It's how I see things, how I feel, my attitudes, which eventually will shape my decisions and behavior. As my understanding shifts at this deep level, how I see things, my perspectives and attitudes will shift. That very deep sense of peace that resides in every human soul will start to emerge, become more stable, and the deepest level of understanding is when I move through the world with a constant feeling of peace, a constant peaceful vision, peaceful attitude, that nothing disturbs that deep sense of peace.
That is true understanding. Om Shanti.
Om Shanti. Good evening. Welcome. Welcome
Welcome.
to interview Raj Yogi. So, a beautiful reflection to take us into this session. We also have our little monitor in front of us,
It's
and
nice.
we have it in front of us for those who've joined. If you have questions, I hope it does pop up. I think it does. So, type any questions you have or thoughts you have in the chat box. So, today's session is pure awareness.
Mm.
And we've talked about pure many times, but perhaps we can maybe break it down a little bit in terms of what is awareness. Just in with respect to Raj Yoga, why is awareness so important and what is it?
Yeah, Raj Yoga, which means king, Raj, king of yogas, really always tries to get to the very root or seed of how we function. And if we keep drilling down, more than thoughts and attitudes, etc., we eventually arrive at the very foundation of how we function, which is awareness or consciousness, how we identify ourselves and therefore everything around us relative to that. So as we shift awareness, everything else will naturally shift. And a very simple example that always comes to my mind is how, for a few decades, someone might just be a person and then suddenly they become a mother. So their awareness just shifted from an individual into mother. And yeah, there's certain cues that might have the presence of their child, but there's certain cues. But it's so powerful, that awareness of being a mother. It completely, they don't have to make any effort to have these very protective feelings for this other being and constantly thinking about them, and they see the whole world relative to that being simply by that shift in awareness. So awareness is very, very powerful. And, when we look at the world, we try and use very superficial ways to fix the world, policies, etc., rules, regulations. But to be able, if we could drill down to that level of awareness, I think things would naturally shift in the world.
So, this question always comes up often,
Mm.
actually, when we talk about awareness in Raj Yoga is what comes first, thoughts or awareness?
Mm.
And why do we have this question? Because it's actually quite important.
Mm. So, if I was to use the example of the human body, for example, physically, it's quite remarkable, just as an aside, how many of the senses are in the head, like on the head. So we've got the mouth and the nose and the eyes and the ears, and the last one, of course, is touch. But that's a very large percentage of activity going on here in terms of how we move through the world. But as an example, there's the physical mouth. And, there's the whole body. And this is one of the capacities of the body, which is to speak. And also we ingest, consume through that. So to put out and take in. And so what we're trying to do in terms of the care of the entire body is use this to engage in activity that will help the body to function. So I'm going to maybe put some food in it, or if I need to express myself, say, whoa, the light's too hot, then I will, I can say things. So it's a capacity I have. It's not separate from the body, it's part of the body and how the body cares for itself. So, similarly, I, as a spiritual being, we say the soul. So, that's a form of awareness, to be aware of myself as a soul. I have this thing called a mind, which is like the mouth of the soul. So, the mind is in the soul. So, what I'm going to try to do is use my mind to engage in behavior that will benefit me. So, it's important. The thoughts in my mind are important, but I, the soul, need to guide that mind. So, they're not really separate. It's not like my mind is separate from me. So, it's a funny situation. I'm always a soul, even when I don't feel it or think about it. But now I'm going to consciously and deliberately use my mind, thoughts, to help me nurture and strengthen that sense of self, the awareness of being a soul. So, just like with the body, we want to put very pure food into the mouth. We always search out food that's pure and organic. I don't think anyone go shopping in the supermarket for impure food. Oh, great, it's impure drink. I'll buy that. We like the word pure on our food labels because we feel it's good for the body. So, similarly, I want to have pure thoughts because they're actually going to nurture a very beneficial awareness sense of self.
So, when you were sharing it to begin with in terms of the awareness piece, it's always coloring how we do things.
Yeah.
And so, why do we use this word pure awareness? And we use this word impure, it's a very heavy word. But when we understand in terms of like 100% pure orange juice and versus you know partially pure orange juice, I'm sure many would sort of I don't really want that partially pure orange juice. So in terms of this pure or impure awareness, what does that mean with respect to Raja Yoga?
Mm. So, first off, before we go too much into exploring the question, I think it's nice for those listening to maybe take a moment or two to sit with the word pure or the feeling of that. Just see how that feels pure. Just take a moment to sit with that. And if any feelings or thoughts that you want to share come up, feel free to put them into the chat box. But I think there's always this innate understanding of pure in the soul. So to give the self a chance to kind of experience that. With Raj Yoga, it's such a fascinating study in many ways, but one of the things that we look at is this capacity to teach purity, or draw out, or to teach purity. And the way we do it is we notice there's a relationship between what is true and what is pure. And we'll often even use the words interchangeably. So, if I'm saying that I'm trying to make something very true or very aligned, then I'm saying I'm returning it to its pure or original state. So there's a deep connection between truth and purity. And when we have a truthful awareness, um, we're looking at another connection or dots that we connect in spirituality, which is the connection of eternal and true. That which is true is eternal. And so pure is connected to truth, truth is connected to eternal. So if we're talking about pure awareness, we're trying to connect to an eternal awareness of the self. Why would we want to do that? Well, I think there comes a point when we notice that I have two choices. Either I can have an eternal awareness of myself, one that's always true, whatever's going on, or I can have a temporary awareness of myself, one that's very situational and short term. And although that may work, of course, it's clear from the idea of it being temporary that it will only work temporarily. So I'm always eventually going to lose that awareness, will come to an end. So, as an example, I might, there's that wonderful story that we heard about the wife of the Dean of Cambridge. So this woman would introduce herself. I am the wife of the Dean of Cambridge. And that's how she always introduced herself at gatherings. And that was her awareness, her identity, her sense of self. It's how she thought and conducted herself. And of course, as drama would have it, they eventually divorced. So that temporary awareness was now, she had to create a new one. And the new one she created wasn't, I'm a soul, but rather, I am the ex wife of the Dean of Cambridge. So now that's her awareness. And you can see that there's a sense of value mixed into that being the wife of the Dean of Cambridge made her feel valuable. Trying to retain that value, she became the ex wife. So that makes it quite loaded awareness when we realize our sense of value. So if someone says, I'm a mother, what they always are hoping for is, I'm a good mother. Eventually, the children leave. We talk about empty nest syndrome. So we're always kind of pegging our sense of self and our value on things that are temporary.
Mm.
And this is why we go up and down on a roller coaster. It doesn't mean we need to move away from anything. I'm just going to reframe my relationship to things. So when I stabilize myself in a eternal awareness, which is a true awareness, a pure awareness, things can change around me, but my sense of self and my value will remain stable. And that will make a big difference in quality of life.
I know that we're still far from the end, but perhaps just listening to share that we had talked about extending some of these topics into more than one session, and I kind of feel like this would be one of them,
Mm.
because perhaps maybe it would be nice for the next few minutes if we could guide us into just what awareness feels like, kind of like yeah, just guiding us into that experience. I think that maybe we think about it and probably it's always there, but what's the difference between, okay, I'm just thinking of myself to be, I don't know, the dean of the school versus that is my identity? How does one able to tell the difference?
Mm. I think one thing as we go into the experience to be aware of is that sometimes what we think of is true will feel true. It may not in absolute sense be true, but if I think it's true, it for that moment
Feels
it
true.
feels true, and that's what makes it very complicated. But we'll take the most basic contrast and play around with that for a few minutes. And again, please feel free to join the conversation through chat. So, what's become a very natural awareness for it seems everyone, except maybe very, very small infants, is to think that we are the body. The awareness of thinking, I am this body. And just as I sit here to check that in myself, how much have I taken on the features of this body, thinking I am male or female according to the body, that I am young or old, that I am of a certain culture, language, religion, of certain parents, family, the sense of I, which is awareness. How much is my sense of self defined by the body in which I am sitting? Just taking a moment to check that. now to consider the possibility that this body is simply a costume I wear. And as I slip out of the awareness, the identification with this body, as if there is me, this thinking, living, experiencing being, and there is this body. And do I, the being, do I really have any age or gender? What belongs to me? What describes me, the being? And what belongs to the body? What describes the body? The awareness that I am the being inside the soul, and getting to know myself as a soul, not through the features of the body, separate from the body. Who am I? Getting to know the self. The body is temporary. It will eventually perish. But I will continue. What are the features of me, the soul? What am I like? To reflect on that, and perhaps noticing the answer always comes in qualities, character, not any physical features. This awareness of myself as a soul is described through qualities, values. Om Shanti.
Om Shanti. Thank you. When you were sharing about, so for those who are online, if you have any experiences or insights,
That it
questions to
pops up.
share, I think it pops up.
Okay.
um, you were sharing that sometimes, or maybe more often than not, we have awarenesses that may not be true to ourselves, but it feels very real.
Mm,
So, for many, I remember this question: how do I know if I'm not just imagining myself to be a soul?
mm,
And that, I'm really actually going there with these temporary awarenesses that we have.
mhm,
Is there a relationship between the degree of tiredness of having these temporary awarenesses
mm,
and being able to actually let go of trying to, continue to fortify them, and being able
mhm.
to let go into this real sense of self?
Yeah, it's an interesting question because I think, if we're honest, we're a little bit conflicted. When it suits us, we want to think of ourselves as the body. But when it doesn't suit us, we say, no, 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 we're more than the body. Don't look at the body. So, right now, as this is being taped on the planet, there's lots of issues around what we could call race relations. And, we're all being inspired to not look at others by the color of their skin. So, does that mean we're not the body? Is that what's being suggested? Or, so we kind of have to clear out the messages in our mind. On one side, we are tired, we're finding it's not working, whether it's gender, so many inequities, so much harm and pain by seeing each other as bodies. So on one side, we're quite tired about it, but on the other side, we've invested so much in it that it's a little bit frightening to
Mm.
shift over. We always think when we have to let go of something we've invested that there's going to be loss. We're not quite sure what the other side will look like. So we're in this conflicted, and there's an equation around this, um, where around fear of change and pain.
Mm.
And everyone, that equation is different, what those two aspects are like. So the idea being that I will embark on a change once the pain outweighs the fear. And for some, the pain has outweighed the fear, and they're open to exploring a change of awareness. But for others, theoretically, they get it. And they might be the ones that imagine it, but it's still, the fear is still greater than the pain or the disinterest, as you called it. So they're still kind of in this imagined theoretical place, not actually going there because of the fear. And it's completely understandable. It really is the deepest shift. If awareness is the very essence of who we are, this is the biggest shift one can be asked to make. So it's understandable that there might be fear. If we could just taste what's on the other side, there's a lovely song we have by the artist, the group Bliss. It's a duo. And I can't remember. I think it's Open Our Eyes or something like this, or A Lot to Learn. I'm not sure which song, but in it there's a line, maybe death is really cool. Maybe all of us are fools. But this idea of exploring that, you know, what we think is maybe frightening could actually be such an improvement on our current condition. So the fear is understandable, but yeah, there has to be a pain or disinterest or some driving force. For some, it's actually deep love. I think if it can become deep love, that's ideal. Deep love for the self and for humanity, that the realization, building the foundation of our lives on temporary things is leading to so much destructiveness and damage. If we can have that realization that love can always overcome fear, that love, out of love for the self, out of love for humanity, I need to change. That would be ideal.
So, practically speaking, if love could drive this,
Mm-hmm.
what does that practically look like for yourself? Trying to
Mm-hmm.
maximize on that this love,
Mm-hmm.
tired of this old way of
Mm-hmm.
operating, but there is some sort of love interest to want to
Mm-hmm.
be real. Practically for yourself, what
Mm-hmm.
do you practically do in the day to maximize on that?
For better or worse, I cannot separate the words love and regard, respect. I can't separate them. And I don't want to sound like we're mercenary, but we're actually extremely value or attainment driven. And it takes perhaps a little bit of work for that connection to happen in our heads, but when I can realize that a pure awareness or an eternal awareness is a deep form of self-respect, because my sense of value again is not pegged on temporary things. It's actually something internal now. When I can get that connection, when I can experience that connection, that sense of deep respect or regard within the self, it's like becoming a diamond. We don't have any. Um, to me, that generates that love, that sense of love, that deep regard, deep respect for the self is love for the self. It's a very, I guess, noble form of love. And similarly, I think what all these race relations are about is we're really crying out to respect each other. And so to have this is deep love for each other as well, to respect each other. We have an understanding here that there's two forms of violence or destructiveness. One is anger, where, I wouldn't do this, but if I hit Nora, this is right out of anger. But the other is when you disrespect, when you strip another being of their value. This is another form of violence or a violation. So that means anger or not love. So the opposite would be to respect, to value another being, to value yourself. Once you begin to experience that, to say I am a soul, that I'm not valuable because of all of these external conditions, but I, the being, am valuable. Once that's experienced, then love becomes, during the day, anytime I find I'm getting a little off, I just slip into that very, very deep memory of self respect, which we call soul consciousness or pure awareness. And immediately the change is so attractive, come what may, right? To really focus on that awareness becomes so attractive when you realize pure self respect is there.
When you said when one experiences that,
Mm.
did you find that kind of emerged when you first started
Well,
this study?
sadly, this is not going to be a helpful answer to anybody because it's very personal. But
Yeah.
yes, the first time, for reasons unknown to me, the first time I heard in lesson one, my first lesson with the Raj Yoga Center, when I heard "You are a soul," I don't remember the instructor saying it. That's how loud the sound was in my head of, okay, this is self-respect.
Mhm.
I really don't remember. I don't remember anything the instructor said. I assume that they talked about the soul, which is lesson one, pure awareness. But all I kept hearing was this loud sound in my head saying, this is a place where you can finally get your self-respect. It was just this automatic. So I don't know if I think it happens in different ways for
Right.
everyone, that connection, being awakened. I think theoretically we can get it.
Hmm.
This contrast of my sense of self being pegged on external, we call it external validation, versus my sense. And some say, no, no, I have self respect. But if we're really, really honest, ask yourself, what is that sense of self value based on? Is it based on skills? Is it based on relations? Is it based on what you have? What is it based on? And when we say soul, we're talking about the character or qualities of the self. I read today a beautiful quote that when one acts, behaves according to their core values, these beautiful qualities, then they're happy. They have that self respect. So it's got to be based, which will come through in our behavior. It's one thing to say, yeah, no, no, I'm patient. But unless it comes through in our behavior,
Hmm.
it's very difficult for the self respect to be built.
So I'm going to keep badgering Judy as the weeks go by. Like, for
It's not
yourself,
badgering.
did you when you felt that, did you how did you nurture that? What did you do? Like, did you have a practice? Did you have a structure?
Well, I don't want to,
For the
yeah.
And it's not really about prescribing something, but
Mm-hmm.
it's nice to hear the efforts
Mm-hmm.
of someone, so that might give someone some, maybe I know, some inspiration of,
Mm-hmm.
because that's what comes up a lot from emails, sessions. Many find it's very abstract. They don't even know where to start, and they're sitting in meditation and they don't really know what they're doing.
Yeah. It's first off, I don't want to discourage or disappoint. I mean, the minute that it emerged, it was like the opposing forces also came to life. Um, all I can say is that I believe deeply in my heart that we are souls, and that at the right time, the soul will wake up. Each of us will wake up. And once we do, we kind of figure out what to do to nurture that. So, yeah, you cannot prescribe for each one what to do. But the idea that Raj Yoga suggests is that this can be a study, that I can actually study my way back to myself is kind of a fascinating concept. So it's not hit and miss. I'm going to engage in a some methodical practices that may initially feel very rusty, if not numb. But if I believe I am a soul, even if I don't feel it, even if it's numb, even if this all feels theoretical imagination, if I deeply believe I am a soul, then I will kind of make it through that first phase where it all feels a little bit theoretical, a little bit like I'm kind of faking it at times. I will make it through that if I keep revising. Okay, keep checking. But what do you believe? What? Yes, I still believe I'm a soul. Yes, I believe. I'll kind of make it through. It's just that we've been so disconnected for so long. It just is a little rusty at first, but it eventually starts to come back online. So I really just, I love the idea that it was a study. So we were given some lifestyle supports we could do. We were given some ideas that we could reflect. And one thing that I did, it was a bit like, I felt I was having my brain washed, is I really exposed myself. I kind of stopped reading any other, I know this sounds extreme, but I stopped reading any other ideas. I only focused on the ideas of Raj Yoga. Now, that may not be other people's cup of tea, but I really felt I wanted to just wash. I didn't want to have a mix of things in there. I just wanted to wash through, make things very simple, and just wash through these ideas of Raj Yoga. And, um, you know, it's a kind of funny thing with fitness because there comes a point where you kind of have to commit to really get full benefit. We heard that lovely story the other day of one of our seniors who they like whatever they do, they like to do in an excellent way. So they thought, well, I could do two things mediocre or one thing excellent. So they realized that they couldn't straddle two things or mix two things, they would have to commit. And that really, I think is the case for anything in life, is if I'm mixing, I'm not really getting the best of anything. But once I go pure and I just focus on this and do this well and try to understand this, then I'm going to take full benefit. So I really better believe in the thing I'm committing to. And people develop great loyalty for groups or clubs or workplaces or what the case. So this is loyalty to a certain understanding, a certain body of knowledge. And it just made total sense to me. I could really see the connection between understanding ourselves to be souls and treating each other in a very respectful way. It just seemed such an obvious connection because the only other option is understanding ourselves to be bodies. And we know what happens when we think we're bodies. We will land up in conflict. Absolutely. No matter how much we don't want to. And I want you to be completely honest with yourself if we're talking race relations. When you look at someone else, you see the color of their skin. That's the first thing you see. Internally, okay, yeah, I see it, but I'm not gonna judge them. But I think we need to be very honest. And wouldn't it be beautiful? This is how children operate, infants. They don't see the color of skin. They don't. The reason I can say that is I knew that was my experience. I grew up in a household that had one parent in a white body, one parent in a black body, and I distinctly remember I did not see it for many years. We literally don't. I mean, it's not like our eyes aren't working. It's literally, though, we do not process the other
There's not a
being that
certain
way.
meaning that's tacked to
Yeah,
that.
we literally
Mhm.
can see them as souls, which doesn't mean that we see points of light. We just experience others on such a deep level. So this is why we say pure awareness, just like the purity of an infant. It literally isn't colored by anything temporary. It's such an eternal experience of ourselves and others, which is such a high level of value and regard.
So we're really just exercising our sense of perception so that
Mm-hmm.
it's back to what it used to be. Hmm. Well, we definitely need another session, that's for sure, because
Mm.
there's quite a few other questions that have actually emerged from a lot of what you're sharing. I better write those things down in my little notebook.
Okay.
But I believe it's time for maybe a wee reflection.
Okay. I can
Thank
see
you
the
for
time.
joining.
Yeah, thank you very much for joining. And really, it's just not to listen and decide, okay, but to judge for yourself, to sit with these ideas, reflect, and try to think them through for yourself. In 1 second, with one thought, I'm completely in this moment, very aware of my own presence. My eyes are open because I want to look out through them. They say that the eyes are the windows to the soul. And as I sit here now, I have that feeling of looking out through the eyes, as if they are indeed windows. I'm aware of myself as the observer. And I question myself. Am I really attached to the gender, the age, the qualities of this body? Or in truth, do I feel closer to the spiritual qualities of love and peace, power and light? This body is a wonder. It can do so much. But in truth, as I sit here, I know very little about how this body works. There's so much going on in this body right now for it to function, and I don't even know 1% of what's happening. To think I am this body seems odd. And although this body is a wonder, the things that make life wonderful are not contained in this body. This body is not responsible for the qualities of love and peace and kindness. Those qualities belong to me, the one who's thinking, observing, feeling. This body can walk, but does it walk peacefully? That depends on me, the one who is expressing through this body. Let me take time and continue to explore this remarkable relationship between me, the being, and this body, the vehicle I express through. Om Shanti.
Om Shanti. Thank you. And thank you for those joining. We will continue this topic next week. It's an important topic. I mean, it is a cornerstone, actually, of Raja Yoga. And these sessions are intended to be practical, which is why I keep poking Judy with questions. What does that look like for you? What were you experiencing? What do you do to practice? So, and she has lots of treasures to share. And so I'm going to pass it over to Judy right now in terms of upcoming sessions.
Thank you, Nora. So we do have another session this week. I know that always sounds odd in case souls are listening to these recordings later, but on Thursdays, much like tonight, Tuesdays, on Thursdays as well, we have drop-in meditation experience, 6:45 to 7:30, and then 7:35 to 8:15, another interview session where we look quite deliberately at the core building blocks of Raj Yoga. And I think we're doing yoga again, part 2 of yoga again. So this is communion of the soul with the Supreme Soul. So part 2 of that. And then we've added on Sundays another experience drop-in session, full hour, 6:30 to 7:30 p.m. I'm always surprised how quickly they go by. On Saturdays, we continue with inner fitness from 2 to 3, but on the Zoom platform. So that's a chance to be a little bit more interactive. And the topic is we're continuing with healing, which was very cool last time. So healing, well, you can never have enough time for healing. So more focus on healing in the upcoming inner fitness. And we will upload, we have now been recording the Zoom sessions. We've gotten permission from those joining. And so you'll be able to listen to those if you choose on this YouTube channel. That should be coming soon. Thank you so much for joining this evening, or if you're listening to the recorded, for listening in. And until we meet again, Om Shanti.